Pandora from The Beautiful Stories of Life and Race to the Top from The Crystal Pool, Myths and Legends of the World, by Cynthia Rylant and Geraldine McCaughrean. Pandora. Zeus was ruler of the universe, and if there were only one thing to remember about him, it was this: never cross him. But someone did. Zeus had always controlled fire. Men could have all the water, all the air, all the earth they wanted, but fire would remain with the gods, for it was the source of all creation. Without it, men would never find their genius, their passion, their own gods within. This was precisely what Zeus intended. But a heroic, and some say foolhardy, man named Prometheus tricked Zeus. He stole fire from the god of gods, and as always happens in the stories of life, action creates consequences. Prometheus not only drew the vengeance of the most powerful god in the universe upon his head, he also set in motion a story that would change the hearts of men forever. When Zeus discovered he had been tricked by a mere mortal, a man, the god's anger was so searing it might have destroyed Earth had Zeus allowed its release. But Zeus was not only powerful, he was shrewd. He understood that true vengeance takes place quietly, intelligently, and with a plan. He swallowed his rage and made one. Zeus took a good long look at men. He was searching for their greatest weakness, for that would be the target of his revenge. Zeus found man's greatest weakness by first finding man's greatest strength. It was love. Those who get what they want, both gods and men, rarely attempt taking it outright. A blatant grab for power is not nearly as effective as a subtle one. Prometheus, thief of fire, had a brother named Epimetheus. Epimetheus was not as cunning as his sibling. In fact, Epimetheus was naive, gullible beyond belief. He was also lonely, but for what or whom he did not know. There was simply a hunger in him, which had never been fulfilled. The god of gods knew what that hunger was. It was what most men on earth hungered for without knowing so. What Epimetheus wanted was the love of a woman. Up until this time in the universe, only men had lived on the earth. There were female goddesses in the heavens, but earth was deprived of the feminine. Zeus had seen no reason to create woman. Men were both useful and uninteresting to Zeus. Why stir them up with women? But when fire was suddenly in men's hands, and it was inevitable that they would use it to create, to grow beyond their animal natures, the question of stirring them up became moot. With fire, the stirring had begun. Zeus loathed this situation, but he had a plan. Zeus would create a mortal woman. He put a great deal of thought into what she would be like, and he asked the other gods and goddesses to assist in her making. Zeus invited them to contribute their best qualities to the molding of this first woman, so that she would be magnificent. Naturally, they all accepted the invitation. Vanity has never been in short supply among the gods. Aphrodite gave her beauty. Apollo gave her intelligence. Hermes gave her cleverness. And so it went, god by goddess, until finally the first mortal woman was complete, and she took her first breath of life. Her name was Pandora. Pandora would be a gift from Zeus to Epimetheus, brother of Prometheus, thief of fire. Zeus would send Pandora with all her beauty, intelligence, cleverness, and rare femininity to Epimetheus, who was both innocent and desperate enough to accept an unearned gift from the most powerful god in the universe. Epimetheus would accept that gift in spite of the warnings from his brother, who was certain Zeus was up to something. Pandora did not arrive empty-handed. She was delivered to Epimetheus along with a beautiful, ornate box, which came with a specific instruction from Zeus. The box was not to be opened. Epimetheus accepted this condition without question. He did not care what was in the box. He had what he wanted and was lost in his love for her. He had Pandora. And beautiful Pandora loved Epimetheus in return. Of course she would. She was the essence of femininity, and she instinctively gave her heart and soul to her husband. With her beauty she pleased him. With her intelligence she understood him. With her cleverness she delighted him. Pandora was everything Epimetheus had ever wanted, and he no longer hungered for anything in the world. Pandora as well was deeply satisfied with her lot. She loved being a woman and wanted nothing more than to give her husband anything that might make him happy. This is why she could not stop thinking about the box. Surely, thought Pandora, whatever was inside the box was meant for Epimetheus, just as she was meant for him. Surely something wonderful was in there, a wedding gift from Zeus, perhaps, meant to tease them a while until the time came to lift up the lid. Pandora waited for word from Zeus, but it did not come. Her husband was not troubled. He was too content. Epimetheus was a man of small mind and not one to care about finding answers to mysteries. But Pandora was made of the gods, and she cared. She cared about why things were as they were, and what might be found inside a forbidden box. Being made of the gods, Pandora was perfect in every way, perfect in all ways, except one. She lacked one quality that none of the gods ever needed, and so could not have given her. Pandora lacked patience. Waiting for something requires a strength unknown to the gods, for they have their own magic and they concoct their own stories. Patience is a purely human strength, sustained by hope, and if it is inspired by deep love, patience can be in its own way invincible. Beautiful Pandora could not even imagine such a quality. So one day she grew tired of waiting, and she opened the box. Pandora first thought they were butterflies, the dozens of winged creatures that flew from inside. She reached for them. Then she caught her breath, horrified. Each winged creature had the face of a demon. Pandora was paralyzed with disbelief as they flew from the box, hovered a moment so she might look into their empty eyes, then disappeared through the window, out into the world. Pandora began to weep. She now knew what Zeus had done. She knew what she had done. Together they had unleashed a multitude of sufferings upon mankind. Disease, war, starvation, depravity, insanity, whatever might create human anguish. Pandora wept, but then impulsively, as the last winged creature exited the box, this woman created of the gods reached out her hand, caught the creature, and put it back inside. And with that one small act, Pandora changed the fate of mankind. For what she had caught and returned to the box was hope. Zeus had put hope in the box, along with the pestilence and the cruelty, believing that hope would not survive in a world so filled with suffering, and he knew mankind could not survive without hope. But Pandora reached out, and she captured it and did not let it go. Because she did so and placed it back inside the box, hope is alive today. It lives in darkness. And in darkness man finds it. Race to the top. In the very highest heaven, Papa Io prepared 3 presents for the human race. He took 3 baskets, and into one put peace and love. Into the second he put songs and spells. Into the third he put help and understanding. The people of Earth would need all these if they were going to get along with one another successfully. And Papa Io knew all about the importance of getting along. He had 2 sons, Tane and Friro, who could no more agree than fire and water. He had put Tane in charge of light, Friro in charge of darkness. The job suited their temperaments perfectly, he thought. For Tane was all brightness, kindness, and goodness, while Friro, although Io wept to admit it, was gloomy, evil, and dangerous. Naturally, when the 3 baskets were ready, it was easy to choose which son should deliver them. Io stuck his head out over heaven's parapet and called through his speaking trumpet, "Tane, come up here. I need you to take these gifts to humankind." Now Hiro knew full well that whoever delivered such fine presents to the people of Earth would win them, heart and mind. They would never stop thanking or praising the messenger. The thought of praise appealed to Hiro. So while Tane climbed up the great tower of overworlds, story by story, up the ladders that led from one floor to the next, Hiro set off to climb the outside of the tower. Like ivy, like a fat black spider creeping silently up a wall, he raced his brother skyward, determined to reach the top first. In his pockets were all the tools of his trade, all the tricks that would give him the advantage. It was slow going, but by the time he reached the second story, Hiro found Tane was already on the third. So out of his pocket he pulled handfuls of mosquitoes, sandflies, and bats. "Kiss my brother for me, my dearios," he said, and flung them in the air. Unsteadily balanced on the ladder between worlds, Tane was suddenly engulfed in a cloud of flying black particles. They flew in his eyes, his ears, his mouth, and up his nose. He bent his head down against the swarm, clinging to the ladder with one hand, while with the other he fumbled in his pocket. At last he tugged out a twist of north wind as big as a towel and waved it around his head. The insects and bats were swept by a frosty gusting gale miles out to sea. So, when Hiro, climbing the outside of the tower, reached the third story, Tane was already well on his way to the fourth. Hiro put his hand in his other pocket and drew out, like a fisherman's maggots, a handful of ants, centipedes, hornets, spiders, and scorpions. "Say hello to my brother from me, sweetlings," he said, and threw them in the air. Halfway up the next tall ladder, Tane heard a crackling and was suddenly vilely beset by creepy crawlies. They swarmed through his hair, infested his clothing. They stung his bare arms and cheeks and calves. Feeling in his pocket, he found no rags of wind, nothing at all to swat them away. There was nothing he could do but shut tight his eyes and mouth and go on climbing, higher and higher, from the 8th to the 9th to the 10th story. Gradually the air became thinner, purer. The holiness emanating from the magic realms above filled the upper stories with a glorious perfume. The disgusting, crawling creatures began to fall away, overcome like mountaineers succumbing to altitude sickness. Outside, on the wall of the great tower of overworlds, even Hiro began to flag. His arms and legs ached. His fingers could barely grip. When he looked down, his head swam at the dizzying drop. He would never make it as far as the 11th story before Tane. Spotting a small window in the side of the tower, Hiro slipped through it, feet first, and found himself on the 9th floor. Very well. If he could not catch Tane on the way up, he would ambush him on the way down. Hiding himself in the shadows behind the ladder, he settled down to wait. In the uppermost overworld, welcoming hands helped Tane from the ladder and led him before Papa Io. And there, while pink evening clouds drifted between the white pillars of highest heaven, Io entrusted his 3 precious presents into Tane's keeping. "Give them to humankind with my love and blessing," said Io, "and tell them to watch out for that infernal brother of yours. He's a tricky one, that Hiro, though I weep to say it about my own son." Carefully, carefully, Tane started back down. The baskets balanced neatly on top of one another. The perfumes of highest heaven were heady, and he was feeling a little lightheaded as he stepped onto the ladder from 10th to 9th overworld. He had only one hand free to grasp the rungs now, and he could not properly see where to place his feet. Suddenly a hand grabbed his ankle and wrenched him off the ladder. He fell, the baskets tumbling on top of him, on top of Hiro, who was just then sinking his teeth deep into Tane's thigh. There in the darkness they fought, good and evil, sparks and foulness spilling from the folds of their clothing. Their panting breaths sped the clouds across the evening sky. Against a blood-red sunset, the tower of overworlds trembled and rocked, while the birds screamed around its shaken frame. "Help! Murder! Ambush!" Firo was rested. He liked to fight, liked to inflict pain, whereas his brother was naturally a gentle soul. But Tane knew, as his brother's hands closed around his throat to throttle him, that if Firo once got hold of the baskets, he would either spill them or use them to take control of Earth and its people. He slapped feebly at his brother's chest, but there was no pushing him away. He reached out a hand across the creaking floor. His fingers brushed a fallen basket. The lid came off and rolled away into the darkness. A wordless song and a single magic spell spilled into Tane's open palm. Suddenly, a sacred magic warmth crept up his wrist and arm, into his aching muscles, inspiring him to one last effort. Pushing Firo backward, Tane toppled him over the edge of the hatchway and thud, down into Overworld 8. Crash! Down into Overworld 7. Bang! Down into 6 and 5 and 4, and so, by painful stages, all the way down to the stony earth. He was not killed. Immortals don't die. And the whole episode did not serve to sweeten his nasty temper. Picking himself up, Firo snarled, "Not deliver the baskets? Well then, I shall make humankind some presents of my own. Sickness for one, crime for another, death for a third." And he slouched away to find baskets big enough for all the miseries he had in store. Tane delivered the 3 baskets safely to the people of Earth. So after that, they were armed against anything Firo could hurl at them. The only lasting damage was to the tower. Shaken and rocked by the titanic struggle on the 9th floor, its rickety structure teeters now, condemned on the world's edge. It would not carry the weight of the smallest child, let alone the great bulk of Papa Io climbing down from the sky. So humankind are on their own now. They will have to make do as best they can with what the gods gave them.